The courtroom went dead silent when I pulled out the flash drive. Garrett's lawyer dropped his pen. It rolled off the table and clattered against the floor, but nobody moved to pick it up. His new wife, Tiffany, sat in the front row clutching her $5,200 Hermes bag like it was a life raft. Her face went from confident to pale in about 3 seconds flat. The judge looked at me over her glasses. "Ma'am, you said you have evidence relevant to the asset division?" "I do, Your Honor." I stood up slowly, smoothing my blazer. "This drive contains 18 months of financial records, email correspondence, and system logs that Mr. Holloway's legal team seemed to have overlooked." Garrett's attorney scrambled to object, but the judge raised her hand. "I'd like to see what Mrs. Thompson has brought us." "It's Miss Thompson now," I corrected her, "and what I have is proof that my ex-husband systematically undervalued company assets during our divorce settlement by approximately $2.3 million. The whispers started immediately. Garrett's mother, Marlene, sitting 3 rows back, clutched her chest like she was having a heart attack. His sister, Jolene, who I'd fired 6 months earlier, looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started, back to when I was still stupid enough to believe that family loyalty meant something, back when I thought being good at my job and being a good wife would be enough. It wasn't. My name is Brenda Thompson, and for 18 years, I was married to Garrett Holloway. We co-founded Pinnacle Hospitality Systems together in 2009, right in the middle of the recession, working out of a cramped apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. Here's what most people didn't know about our company. Garrett was the face. He did the sales calls, the investor meetings, the golf outings with hotel chain executives. He had the charm, the firm handshake, the ability to make people feel like they were his best friend within 5 minutes of meeting him. I was the brain. I wrote 73% of our original code base. Every algorithm that made our property management software actually work, every integration with booking platforms, every security protocol that kept our clients' data safe, that was me. I'm the one who stayed up until 3 a.m. debugging code while Garrett slept. I'm the one who took calls from panicked hotel managers at 6 a.m. when their systems crashed during peak check-in times. Our software managed reservations, housekeeping schedules, and revenue optimization for over 340 hotels across North America. Our annual recurring revenue had grown to $14.2 million. We had 47 employees, an office in downtown Seattle with the view of Elliott Bay, and contracts with 3 major hotel chains worth a combined $3.8 million per year. And my husband paid me a salary of $42,000 a month. Not because he was generous, because I negotiated it into our operating agreement when we incorporated, because even back then, some part of me knew I needed protection. What I didn't know was how much I'd need it. The thing about being the technical co-founder is that everyone assumes you're replaceable. They think code is code, that any programmer can do what you do. Garrett certainly thought so. He'd introduced me at industry events as our head of development, like I was just another employee. Never as co-founder, never as the person who built everything he was selling. Our clients knew better. When Harrington Hotels had a critical system failure during their busiest weekend of the year, they didn't call Garrett, they called me. When Coastal Resorts needed custom integrations for their new loyalty program, they specifically requested that I handle it personally. The CTO of Meridian Hospitality Group once told me directly that they renewed their $850,000 annual contract because of me, not because of our software, because of me. I kept records of everything. Every email where a client praised my work, every system log showing who actually fixed problems, every performance report that proved our revenue spikes coincided with features I developed, not sales campaigns Garrett ran. I didn't know why I was keeping them at the time, maybe some survival instinct buried deep down. Maybe I just liked having proof that I mattered. It turned out to be the smartest thing I ever did. The first time I suspected something was wrong was our company's 10th anniversary party in 2019. We'd rented out the rooftop bar at the Fairmont Olympic. Garrett had insisted on it, even though I thought it was excessive. $47,000 for one evening? I'd argued we should do something smaller, more intimate, but he'd waved me off. This is about perception, Brenda. Our clients need to see we're successful. Trust me. I always trusted him. That was my first mistake. We had clients there, investors, employees, industry contacts. Everyone who mattered in Seattle's hospitality tech scene was crowded onto that rooftop, drinking champagne and eating canapes that cost $15 each. That's when I noticed her, Tiffany Kessler. She was listed on the guest list as a marketing consultant, someone Garrett had hired 3 months earlier to refresh our brand identity. She was 29, blonde, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. The kind of woman who walks into a room expecting every head to turn. I watched her touch my husband's arm 4 times during a 15-minute conversation. I counted. I watched him lean in close to whisper something that made her laugh, her hand finding his elbow like it belonged there. I watched the way his eyes followed her when she walked to the bar, the way he forgot mid-sentence what he was saying to our biggest client. Most wives would have confronted him right there, made a scene, demanded answers. I didn't. Instead, I went back to the office the next morning and started auditing our marketing expenses, because that's who I am. I don't react, I research, I document, I build a case. What happened next would change everything. What I found made my stomach turn. Tiffany's consulting contract was for $8,500 a month, reasonable for the scope of work described. But there were additional payments: hotel stays in Portland, 4 of them in 3 months, flights to San Francisco for conferences our company wasn't attending, a $3,200 charge at a jewelry store that appeared nowhere in our marketing budget. I pulled up the hotel receipts. The Nines in Portland, a boutique hotel with $400 per night suites. Each stay was for 2 nights, always on weekends, always the same room type, king bed. She didn't need a king bed to work on our brand identity. I didn't say anything, not yet. I just kept watching, kept documenting every receipt, every flight, every charge that didn't add up. I created a folder on my personal computer, password protected, and added to it every week. The affair became impossible to ignore by spring of 2020. Garrett started working late 3 or 4 nights a week. He bought new clothes, shirts with European cuts that he never would have chosen himself. Started going to the gym again, something he hadn't done in 5 years. Got a haircut that made him look 10 years younger. All the cliches, all the obvious signs. I could have made a bingo card. He started sleeping on the far edge of the bed, his back to me. When I reached for him, he'd mumble something about being tired, about stress at work. Meanwhile, he was texting under the table during dinner, his phone screen angled away from me. One night, I checked his phone while he was in the shower. I'm not proud of it. The woman I was then would have said she trusted her husband, that snooping was beneath her. But I needed to know. The not knowing was eating me alive. The messages were right there, not even hidden in a separate app. He was that arrogant, that certain I'd never check. Or maybe he just didn't care anymore. The texts were graphic, things I won't repeat. Promises about their future together, about traveling the world once things were settled. Plans for a beach house in Costa Rica, a life that didn't include me. And worst of all, complaints about me. She's just the tech person, he'd written. Easily replaceable once I find someone competent. She has no idea how to run a business. I've been carrying her for years. She's like furniture at this point, you know? Just part of the house. I read that message 3 times. Each time it felt like a knife sliding between my ribs, twisting a little deeper. Furniture. He compared me to furniture? Carrying me? I'd built everything he was selling, every line of code, every system that made our clients' hotels run smoothly, every algorithm that generated the revenue reports he showed off to investors. I was the reason we had a company at all, and he thought I was replaceable? He thought I was furniture. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I put it back exactly where I'd found it, went to the bathroom, and sat on the edge of the tub until my breathing steadied. That was the night something changed inside me. The love I'd felt for 18 years didn't die at all at once. It cracked, like ice on a warming lake, hairline fractures spreading in every direction. That's when I started planning. Looking back, that was the moment everything shifted. Garrett's sister Jolene had worked at Pinnacle for 5 years. Her official title was Client Success Manager, which sounded impressive until you looked at what she actually did, or rather, what she didn't do. I pulled her personnel file that same week. Her performance reviews were glowing, exceeded expectations, exceptional relationship management skills, a vital asset to the team, strong communication abilities, client retention champion. Except I was the one who wrote those reviews, and I'd been generous. Too generous, because that's what good wives did, right? They supported their husband's family, they made sacrifices, they kept the peace. The truth was more complicated. Jolene had been hired because Garrett insisted. She's family, he'd said. She needs a break. Things have been hard for her since the divorce. I'd agreed because I wanted to be supportive, because I believed family meant something. For 5 years, I'd been covering for her. When she missed client calls, I followed up with apologies about technical difficulties. When her reports were late, I finished them at midnight and backdated the timestamps. When she made errors in the system, booking conflicts that could have cost us thousands, I fixed them before anyone noticed. The Harrington Hotel's incident was typical. Jolene had promised them a custom reporting feature by the end of Q2. She hadn't even started the paperwork. Their VP of operations called, furious, threatening to take their $340,000 annual contract elsewhere. I worked 3 18-hour days to build the feature myself, then let Jolene present it to the client like it was her accomplishment. "Thank you so much, Jolene," the VP had said. "This is exactly what we needed." She'd smiled and accepted the praise without a flicker of guilt, without even glancing in my direction. And every single time something like that happened, she took the credit. I started digging deeper. Our CRM system logged everything. Every email sent, every call made, every task completed, every file accessed. The data told a story Jolene wouldn't want anyone to hear. She had no idea what was waiting for her. In the past 12 months, she'd closed exactly 0 new contracts. Every deal attributed to her had actually been finalized by me or Garrett after she fumbled the initial conversations. Her client retention rate was 23% below the company average. And she'd logged an average of 4 hours of actual work per day while claiming overtime on her timesheets. 8 extra hours a week at $95 per hour. That was $19,760 in overtime she hadn't earned. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the client contact list. Every single one of her clients was listed under her personal email and phone number, not the company system. She'd essentially created a private database of our customers, positioning herself as the sole point of contact, building her own little kingdom inside my company. I pulled the communications logs. In client emails, she always signed off with her personal cell number. "Please feel free to reach me directly anytime," as if she was doing them a favor, as if she was the only one who could help them. At any other company, this would be grounds for immediate termination, a clear violation of data security policies, a blatant attempt to make herself irreplaceable by holding client relationships hostage. At our company, it was complicated because she was Garrett's sister, because she was family, because confronting her meant confronting him, and I wasn't ready for that fight. Not yet. I saved all of it. Screenshots, exports, system logs with timestamps, email headers proving chain of custody, everything I needed to make an airtight case. Then I waited. The decision I was about to make would cost them everything. The humiliation came in waves. First, it was financial. In March of 2021, Garrett called a partners meeting. Just the two of us, sitting in the conference room where we'd celebrated so many wins over the years. "We need to restructure our executive access," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "The board is concerned about security protocols." What board? We didn't have a formal board. We had 2 investors who checked in quarterly and mostly left us alone. "It's just a precaution," he continued. "Your access to the financial accounts will be limited to read-only. I'll handle all transactions going forward." I sat there, stunned. He was cutting me off from my own company's money? From accounts I'd helped build from 0 to 8 figures? "Garrett," I said slowly, "I'm a co-founder. I have equity rights, and you'll keep them. This is just operational for efficiency." Efficiency. He used that word like it was a shield, like it made what he was doing acceptable. I could have fought. I could have called our lawyers, demanded my rights, made a scene, but something told me to wait, to let him think he'd won. So I nodded. I signed the paperwork limiting my access, and that night I logged into every system I controlled and created backup credentials that Garrett didn't know existed. The social humiliation came next. In June, we hosted a dinner for potential investors. A venture capital firm from San Francisco was interested in acquiring a minority stake, Redwood Capital Partners. They managed $2.3 billion in assets and had already invested in two of our competitors. This could be huge for us, life-changing money, the kind of deal that would secure Pinnacle's future for decades. I spent 2 weeks preparing materials, technical roadmaps, security audits, scalability projections, everything an investor would need to understand why our software was worth their money. Garrett seated me at the far end of the table, away from the decision makers, between our junior accountant and an HR coordinator who looked as confused as I felt about being there. He'd put Tiffany next to him, introducing her as our strategic marketing director, a title I didn't remember approving. She was wearing a $2,400 dress, something red and clingy that she'd charged to the company card. I'd seen the receipt. I watched him pour her wine. The way his hand lingered on hers when he passed the glass, the way she leaned into him when he made a joke, her laugh a little too loud, a little too performative. The investors noticed. How could they not? I watched them nod along to whatever vision Garrett was selling them, a vision that depended entirely on technology I had built. He talked about innovation, about disruption, about revolutionizing the hospitality industry. Buzzwords strung together like Christmas lights, pretty but meaningless. And then, during the main course, one of the investors asked about our core technology. Marcus Chen, the managing partner, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s who'd made his fortune spotting companies that other people underestimated. "I'm curious about your technical architecture," he said. "How scalable is it? What's your roadmap for the next 5 years?" Garrett smiled, that charming smile of his, the one that had worked on me 18 years ago, that still worked on clients and investors and women like Tiffany. He started explaining things he'd barely understood, using buzzwords he'd picked up from tech blogs. Microservices, cloud native, AI enabled, words he couldn't define if his life depended on it. I could see Marcus Chen's eyes glazing over. The other investors exchanged glances, the kind of glance that said, "This guy doesn't know what he's talking about." "Actually," I interrupted, "if I may." The table went quiet. Garrett's smile tightened, his jaw clenching in that way I knew meant I'd pay for this later. But I didn't care anymore. I was done being furniture. "Our architecture is built on a microservices model," I continued, my voice steady and clear. "We can scale horizontally across multiple cloud providers, which gives us both redundancy and cost flexibility. Currently, we're deployed across AWS and Azure with failover capabilities that ensure 99.97% uptime. Marcus Chen turned toward me, suddenly interested. His pen was moving. "Our proprietary algorithm for demand forecasting has reduced our clients' overbooking incidents by 34% compared to industry standard. That translates to approximately $2.8 million in annual savings across our client base. Our API integration time is down to an average of 3 weeks, compared to the industry average of 8. That's because I designed our integration layer to be modular and self-documenting." Marcus leaned forward. "You built this system." "Every line of it," I confirmed. "The original architecture, the scaling protocols, the security framework. I also handle all major client integrations personally. That's why our renewal rate is 94%. For the rest of the dinner, Marcus directed his questions to me. What was our technical debt? How did we handle legacy system migrations? What were our plans for machine learning implementation? I answered everything, confidently, accurately, the way someone answers when they've spent 15 years living inside a codebase. Garrett sat there, silent, his jaw tight with barely concealed anger. Tiffany kept trying to redirect the conversation back to marketing, but no one was listening to her. The investors wanted to talk to the person who actually built things. After dessert, Marcus Chen shook my hand. "Brenda," he said, "I'll be honest. I came here skeptical, but you've changed my mind. Let's talk next week about moving forward." He didn't shake Garrett's hand. That night, after the investors left, Garrett cornered me in the kitchen. His face was red, his hands clenched at his sides. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "You made me look incompetent in front of a $2.3 billion fund." I answered honestly. "They asked about the technology. I know the technology. Would you rather I had lied?" His voice dropped to something cold, something I'd never heard before. "You need to stay in your lane, Brenda. The business side is mine. The client relationships are mine. The investor meetings are mine. Remember that." I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to remind him that there was no business without my technology, that he was nothing but a salesman selling a product he didn't understand, that every contract he'd ever closed was because of features I built at 3 a.m. while he slept. Instead, I said goodnight and went to bed. Because I was still waiting, still planning, still documenting, and what happened next would prove I was right to wait. The final humiliation came in September. Garrett called a staff meeting to announce organizational changes. The whole company gathered in our largest conference room, 47 people who depended on Pinnacle for their livelihoods, developers I'd mentored, account managers I'd trained, the entire team that had helped us grow from a 2-person startup to an industry leader. Something felt different that morning. Garrett was wearing his best suit. Tiffany was already seated in the front row, her posture perfect, her expression carefully neutral. She knew something the rest of us didn't. "I'm pleased to announce," Garrett began, his voice projecting confidence, "that we're creating a new executive position, Chief Operating Officer. This role will oversee all day-to-day operations, ensuring we're positioned for our next phase of growth." The employees murmured with interest. A COO would be a significant hire, a sign that we were maturing as a company. I assumed he was going to announce an external search, someone with Fortune 500 experience, someone who could bring fresh perspective. "I'm even more pleased to announce," Garrett continued, "that we found the perfect candidate, someone with deep knowledge of our industry and a passion for excellence, someone who has already demonstrated their commitment to Pinnacle's success." He paused for effect. The room went silent. "Please join me in welcoming our new COO, Tiffany Kessler." The applause started slowly, scattered and confused. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to process what I was hearing. He'd given his mistress an executive position in our company, the company I had built from nothing while he golfed with clients. Tiffany walked to the front of the room, beaming. She gave a little speech about how excited she was to join the leadership team, about her vision for operational excellence, about synergy and efficiency and all the corporate buzzwords that meant nothing. I didn't hear most of it. I was too busy noticing the reactions around me. Some employees looked genuinely happy, the ones who didn't know what was really going on. Others looked confused, wondering how a marketing consultant had leapfrogged into the C-suite. A few, the ones who'd been with us the longest, the ones who knew how hard I worked, they looked directly at me with something like pity in their eyes. Our senior developer, a man named Dennis, who'd been with us for 12 years, caught my gaze. He shook his head almost imperceptibly, a tiny gesture of solidarity that meant more than he knew. That was the moment I knew my marriage was over. Not because of the affair, not because of the financial manipulation, because he'd publicly replaced me in my own company with the woman he was sleeping with, because he'd announced to everyone I worked with that I was disposable, that someone with no technical knowledge, no operational experience, no understanding of our product could be elevated above me. COO, she was going to be my boss. The thought made me physically ill. After the meeting, I went to my office and closed the door. I didn't cry, I didn't throw things, I didn't call a lawyer or confront my husband or do any of the things a normal person might do. I just sat at my desk and opened my laptop. For the next 3 hours, I reviewed every document I'd been collecting, the affair evidence with dates and expenses and hotel receipts, the financial irregularities with amounts and account numbers and authorization signatures, Jolene's performance failures with metrics and logs and client complaints. The client communications that proved I was the one keeping this company alive. By midnight, I had a plan. A detailed, systematic, legally defensible plan. Garrett thought he'd won. He thought he'd sidelined me, replaced me, rendered me irrelevant. He was wrong. And that decision would cost him everything. I hired Randall Vickers on a recommendation from a lawyer friend. He was a forensic accountant, the kind who specialized in finding money that people didn't want found. 63 years old, gray hair, reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, and the demeanor of a patient grandfather. The kind of man you trust to help with your taxes. But behind that mild exterior was a mind like a steel trap. He had testified in over 40 fraud cases. He'd helped unravel embezzlement schemes at companies 3 times our size. When he looked at spreadsheets, he saw stories other people missed. I need you to audit our company finances, I told him at our first meeting. I need to know exactly where every dollar has gone for the past 3 years. He didn't ask why. He didn't offer sympathy or speculation. He just nodded, pulled out a yellow legal pad and quoted his rates. $375 an hour. Worth every penny, he added, and I'll be worth it. I paid gladly. While Randall worked the numbers, I started my own investigation. The system logs were easy. As CTO, I had administrator access to everything. I could see every email Jolene had ever sent through our servers, every file she'd accessed, every login timestamp, every document she created or modified. What I found confirmed everything I suspected and more. Jolene's performance reports, the ones that made her look like a star, I pulled the metadata from the file properties, last modified by Brenda Thompson. Every single one. I'd edited them so heavily that her original drafts were unrecognizable. I found one of her originals in the backup archives. Her Q3 2021 summary for the Coastal Resorts account read like a middle schooler's book report. Everything is going good. The client is happy. We should keep doing what we're doing. I'd rewritten it into a comprehensive analysis with retention metrics, satisfaction scores, and strategic recommendations. The version that went to Garrett looked like it was written by an MBA graduate, because functionally, I'd written it. Her client retention numbers, I cross-referenced them with our support tickets. In 67% of cases where a client had nearly churned, I was the one who'd personally intervened to save the relationship. Late-night phone calls, custom solutions, service credits from my own discretionary budget. Jolene just collected the quarterly bonus. And then there was the money. Randall called me on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks into the audit. His voice was carefully neutral. You need to see this. Can you come to my office? I drove through rush hour traffic. His conference room looked like a crime scene from a financial thriller. Spreadsheets laid across the table in chronological order, transaction flows highlighted in yellow and red, sticky notes covering every surface. Your mother-in-law, he began, pointing to a stack of bank records, Marlene Holloway. She's been receiving $750 a month from your joint account for the past 7 years. I knew about that. It was the family support I'd agreed to years ago. Marlene was on a fixed income. It was the right thing to do. But look at these, Randall continued, pointing to another column. Additional transfers, irregular amounts, $400 here, $600 there, $1,200 once, always to the same recipient's account. I leaned closer. The account belonged to Jolene. It gets worse, Randall said. He pulled up another sheet, this one showing internal company transactions. These are bonus payments made to Jolene Holloway from Pinnacle's operating account, approved by Garrett Holloway, all classified as performance incentives. He'd highlighted the totals. $12,500 in 2019, $18,700 in 2020, $15,800 in 2021. Grand total, $47,000 over 3 years. I felt sick, not because of the money itself, because of what it meant. Garrett had been funneling company funds to his sister for years, and Marlene had been using my allowance to cover Jolene's personal debts. I'd been funding my own humiliation without even knowing it. Randall had more. He always had more. Tiffany's consulting contract had ballooned from $8,500 a month to $15,000, with no corresponding increase in deliverables, no new marketing campaigns, no brand refresh, no measurable results, just payments for work that existed only on paper. There were company credit card charges for personal expenses, a $4,800 shopping spree at Nordstrom, $2,300 at a furniture store, travel that had nothing to do with business, a $28,000 home office renovation at Garrett's new apartment. I stopped him there. New apartment? Randall looked uncomfortable. He pulled up a lease agreement. He signed this 3 months ago, a 2-bedroom in Belltown. The deposit was $8,200 and the first month's rent was $4,100, both paid from the company operating account. Garrett was already planning his exit. He'd been setting up his new life for months, using company money, and I hadn't known. No, that's not quite true. I hadn't let myself know. Some part of me had suspected, but I'd pushed it down, kept working, kept hoping things would somehow get better. They weren't going to get better, and now I had the receipts to prove it. The trap came together in pieces. First, I approached our most important clients directly, not to poach them, just to strengthen relationships. I scheduled video calls with the CTOs and operations directors I'd worked with for years. We talked about upcoming features, integration challenges, their long-term technology roadmaps. Every conversation I documented, every email where they expressed preference for working with me specifically, every contract clause that tied their service agreements to technical support I personally provided. Second, I quietly updated our employee handbook. As CTO, I had the authority to implement IT security policies. One of my new policies required all client communications to go through company systems, no personal email addresses, no personal phone numbers. I sent the memo to all staff, copying Garrett and Tiffany. The language was purely procedural: compliance requirements, data security, industry best practices. Nobody could object without looking suspicious. Jolene objected anyway. She stormed into my office the day the policy took effect. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "My clients are used to reaching me directly. You're going to damage those relationships." I looked at her calmly. "Actually, they're the company's clients, and this policy protects everyone, including you. If you ever leave, you won't be accused of taking proprietary information with you." Her face went red. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't, not without admitting what she'd really been doing. Third, I implemented new performance metrics, quantifiable KPIs for every role in the company: client response time, issue resolution rate, contract renewal success, everything tied to hard data that the system tracked automatically. Garrett signed off on it without really reading it. He was too distracted by Tiffany, by his secret apartment, by whatever fantasy future he was building in his head. He didn't realize I was building a case, a paper trail so clear that even the most biased observer couldn't ignore it. And then, finally, I let him serve me with divorce papers. The divorce filing came on a Wednesday in October. Garrett walked into my office, his expression a bizarre mixture of guilt and relief. "Brenda, we need to talk." I already knew what was coming. His lawyer had filed that morning. I'd gotten the notification on my phone during my commute. "I know," I said. "I saw the filing." He blinked, surprised that I wasn't crying. "I'm sorry it came to this." "Are you?" He didn't answer that. Instead, he launched into a speech he'd clearly rehearsed, something about growing apart, about wanting different things, about how we'd be better off as co-parents to the company rather than spouses. I let him talk. I watched him pace around my office, gesticulating like he was pitching to investors. He'd always loved the sound of his own voice. When he finally wound down, I asked the only question that mattered: "What about Pinnacle?" He had the answer ready. "You'll keep your equity stake, obviously, but I think it's best if you step back from day-to-day operations, focus on the technical side, let Tiffany handle the business strategy." There it was. He wanted me out of the way so his mistress could play CEO. "Okay," I said. He stared at me. "Okay? I'll review the proposed settlement with my lawyer. We'll negotiate terms that work for both of us." Garrett's shoulders relaxed. He'd expected a fight. He'd prepared for tears, for accusations, for the drama he probably thought I was entitled to. Instead, I gave him nothing. No satisfaction, no scene. Just calm professionalism. Because I knew something he didn't. The settlement he was proposing would give me exactly what I needed: time, access, and the legal standing to protect everything I'd built. He left my office that day thinking he'd won. He had no idea. The next 6 months were a masterclass in patience. I signed the divorce papers in December. The terms were not in my favor on the surface. Garrett kept the house. He kept majority control of day-to-day business decisions. He kept his title as CEO. But I kept my equity stake, I kept my role as CTO, and I kept access to every system, every log, every piece of data that documented what was really happening inside our company. 4 days after the divorce was finalized, Garrett married Tiffany. They did it at a courthouse in Bellevue with Marlene and Jolene as witnesses. Tiffany posted about it on Instagram that same evening, her ring sparkling in the Seattle winter light. A friend texted me a screenshot. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up Garrett's credit card statements. Company cards, of course, the ones he'd used to fund his affair. In the first week of their marriage, Tiffany spent $4,800 on clothes. The second week, $3,200 on spa treatments and salon visits. By the end of their first month together, her spending had topped $14,000. I documented everything: dates, amounts, categories, evidence of personal expenses being charged to the business. And then there was Jolene. Under my new performance metrics, her numbers were impossible to hide. Client response time, 340% above company average. Issue resolution rate, 62% of tickets had to be escalated to someone else. Contract renewal success, 0 new renewals in Q4. I scheduled a formal performance review for February, by the book, documented, witnessed by HR. During the meeting, Jolene sat across from me with her arms crossed, radiating resentment. "These numbers don't reflect my actual contribution," she insisted. "I bring relationships. I bring client loyalty." I pulled up a specific example. The Harrington Hotels accounts. They've been with us for 6 years. According to your records, you've handled all their communications. "Exactly," she said. "Then, can you explain why their CTO specifically requested that I handle their contract renewal last month? And why their email to you about a critical integration issue sat unanswered for 11 days? She had no answer. I slid a paper across the table. "This is a performance improvement plan. You have 60 days to bring your metrics in line with company standards. If you don't, we'll need to discuss next steps." Her face went white, then red. "You can't do this to me. I'm family." "Actually, I can. I'm your supervisor, and this documentation goes back 18 months. If you want to contest it, you're welcome to review the data yourself." She grabbed the paper, crumpled it in her fist, and stormed out. That night, she called Garrett. He called me an hour later, his voice tight with anger. "What the hell are you doing to my sister?" "My job," I said simply. "She's not meeting performance standards. I'm giving her a chance to improve." "This is revenge. You're using your position to punish her because you're bitter about the divorce." "If I were bitter," I said, "I would have fired her immediately. Instead, I'm following proper HR procedures. Documented, defensible, legal." He couldn't argue with that. He knew I had the data on my side. "Brenda," he warned, "if you push this, there will be consequences." "I understand," I said. "Good night, Garrett." And then I hung up and poured myself a glass of wine, because that was exactly what I wanted him to think. Jolene lasted exactly 43 days on the performance improvement plan. She didn't try to improve. She couldn't. For 5 years, I'd been doing her job for her. Without me covering her mistakes, there was nothing to hide behind. The final straw came when she missed a deadline for a contract renewal with Coastal Resorts. Not by a day, by 2 weeks. The client had emailed her 3 times, then escalated directly to me. By the time I intervened, they were already talking to our competitors. I saved the account, barely, but the paper trail was devastating. The termination meeting happened on a Friday afternoon. Jolene, our HR director, and me in the conference room. I had a stack of documentation 6 inches thick. This decision is based on documented performance failures over an 18-month period, missed deadlines, client complaints, metrics consistently below company standards. You were given a 60-day improvement plan and failed to meet any of the specified goals. Jolene didn't cry. She laughed, a bitter, disbelieving sound. "You think you've won," she said. "You think firing me hurts me. I'll have another job within a week. My clients will follow me anywhere." Your clients, I corrected her, are the company's clients, and as of this morning, all their contact information has been migrated to our central system, as required by the IT policy I implemented 4 months ago. Her face went pale. You planned this. I planned nothing, I said. I implemented industry-standard security protocols. Your failure to comply with them is part of why we're here. She stood up so fast her chair tipped over. This isn't over. Actually, it is. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. Your final paycheck will be direct deposited. Goodbye, Jolene. She stormed out. I heard her yelling at Garrett in his office down the hall, her voice carrying through the walls. He couldn't help her. He'd signed off on every policy, every metric, every procedure I'd used. His name was on the paperwork. By Monday, word had spread through the company. The reaction was exactly what I had expected. Thank God, one senior developer said at the coffee machine. She was making us all look bad. I heard she blamed everyone but herself, another employee added. Classic. Within a week, efficiency metrics improved across every department that had worked with Jolene. Response times dropped, client satisfaction scores rose. It turned out that removing a toxic employee did more for morale than any team-building exercise ever could. And Jolene? She got a job at Cloud9 Solutions, one of our smaller competitors. Their head of sales had met her at a conference once and been charmed by her confidence. He thought he was stealing a star performer. He was about to learn otherwise. Jolene's implosion at Cloud9 happened faster than I expected. Without me fixing her mistakes, without Garrett protecting her from consequences, she was exposed. Her first client call at the new company went badly. She quoted the wrong prices from an old pricing sheet she'd brought from Pinnacle, the kind of mistake that happened when you didn't actually do your own work. Her manager confronted her about it. She blamed the company's confusing systems. The manager wasn't sympathetic. Within 3 weeks, she'd caused 2 more significant errors, a missed delivery deadline that cost Cloud9 $15,000 penalty clause, a contract negotiation where she promised features their software didn't actually have. I heard about it through industry contacts. The hospitality tech scene in Seattle was small. Everyone knew everyone, and gossip traveled fast. She kept talking about her old company, one contact told me, how things were better there, how she was trained differently. Nobody wanted to hear it. By month 2, Cloud9 put her on a performance improvement plan. Sound familiar? She quit before they could fire her, leaving them scrambling to cover her accounts. She told everyone she'd left because the company wasn't a good culture fit. But word got around. Nobody in Seattle's hospitality tech scene wanted to touch her. Meanwhile, Tiffany's spending continued to spiral. The first month of marriage, $14,000. The second, $18,500. By month 3, she was averaging over $20,000 in personal expenses, all charged to company accounts. Garrett confronted her about it in April. I know because he accidentally copied me on an email he meant to send only to her. We need to discuss your spending, he'd written. The board is asking questions about expense reports. Her response was immediate and sharp. You promised me I could live the life I deserved. Are you going back on your word already? They argued. I didn't see the rest of the thread, but I didn't need to. The pattern was clear. And then there was Marlene. Tiffany refused to visit her. Every weekend, some excuse. She had a spa appointment. Her mother needed her. She had a work obligation that somehow never seemed to exist on her calendar. Barbara's my friend, I heard through the grapevine. She's been complaining to everyone at church about her new daughter-in-law. The woman who'd never had a kind word for me, who'd celebrated my divorce, who told everyone I was cold and difficult, now she was discovering what cold and difficult really looked like. Garrett started calling me in May. Not to apologize, never that. Just to complain about things he couldn't complain about to anyone else. She's spending $2,500 a month supporting her mother, he told me during one late-night call. Her mother doesn't even need the money. She owns her house outright. I see, I said neutrally. And she won't visit my mom, won't even send the birthday card. My mother is devastated. I'm sorry to hear that. There was a long pause. Brenda, he said finally, his voice strange. I think I made a mistake. I didn't respond. I let the silence stretch until he mumbled goodbye and hung up. Because that wasn't an apology. That was self-pity. There's a difference. The divorce between Garrett and Tiffany was filed in July. He served her papers first, to his credit, but she came back swinging. Her lawyer demanded $275,000 in alimony, citing the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to during their 9-month marriage. 9 months. Less time than it takes to have a baby. Garrett tried to negotiate. He offered $50,000. She countered with $250,000. Back and forth, lawyers getting richer by the hour. And then her lawyer got creative. He subpoenaed Pinnacle's financial records. He wanted to prove that Garrett had undervalued his assets during settlement negotiations. That's when I got the call. Ms. Thompson, we'd like you to testify about the company's technical infrastructure and its value to ongoing operations. I agreed immediately. The court date was set for September. For 3 months, I prepared, not to destroy Garrett, not exactly, just to tell the truth. And the truth was devastating enough. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the American flag hanging limply in the corner. Not the dramatic arena I'd imagined during all those nights of planning. But the faces were exactly right. Garrett, looking 10 years older than he had a year ago. Tiffany, her confidence visibly cracking around the edges. Marlene, clutching her purse like a shield. And Jolene, unemployed and living back home, forced to watch her family's unraveling in real time. The proceedings started with the usual legal theater. Statements from both lawyers, financial documents entered into evidence, testimony from accountants about asset values. And then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand with the flash drive in my jacket's pocket. The lawyer who'd subpoenaed me began with simple questions. My role at Pinnacle, my equity stake, my involvement in the company's founding. Then we got to the good part. Ms. Thompson, he said, in your professional opinion, what is the fair market value of Pinnacle Hospitality Systems? That depends, I said, on what you're valuing. Could you elaborate? Certainly. If you're valuing the company's contracts, revenue, and physical assets, the number presented to this court is approximately accurate. But if you're valuing the intellectual property, specifically the proprietary software that generates all that revenue, the situation is more complicated. How so? I pulled out the flash drive. May I approach the monitor? The judge nodded. I plugged in the drive and pulled up my presentation. The first slide showed a graph. This is a breakdown of Pinnacle's code base by author. The blue section represents code I personally wrote or significantly modified. As you can see, it comprises 73% of the total. The second slide showed revenue correlation. This chart demonstrates that our major revenue increases coincide with feature releases I developed. The correlation is 0.94. The third slide showed client retention. These are testimonials from our largest clients, specifically crediting our technical capabilities for their continued business. I have signed statements from 12 CTOs and operations directors. Garrett's lawyer objected. Your Honor, this is beyond the scope of the subpoena. The judge looked at me. Ms. Thompson, where are you going with this? Your Honor, I said calmly, I'm demonstrating that the company's value is substantially dependent on intellectual property that I created. During my divorce from Mr. Holloway, this IP was not properly valued. The settlement I agreed to was based on incomplete information. The room went silent. I continued. Furthermore, I have documentation showing that company funds were used for personal expenses during the period when Mr. Holloway was concealing his relationship with Miss Kessler. These expenses were not disclosed during our divorce proceedings. I pulled up the next file. $47,000 in bonus payments to Jolene Holloway for performance that my records show she did not actually achieve. $28,000 for an apartment renovation that Mr. Holloway began before filing for divorce. $83,000 in personal charges on company credit cards by Miss Kessler during the period she was employed as a marketing consultant. Tiffany's lawyer leaned over to whisper something urgent. Garrett's lawyer was scrambling through his papers. Marlene looked like she might faint, but I wasn't done. Your Honor, I believe the asset division from my divorce should be revisited in light of this evidence. I also believe these documents are relevant to Miss Kessler's current claims against Mr. Holloway. The judge studied the screen for a long moment. Then she turned to both lawyers. I'm going to call a recess. I want both parties to review these documents with their counsel. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning. The gavel came down. I stepped off the witness stand and walked past Garrett without looking at him, past Tiffany, who was crying now, her mascara running, past Marlene, who opened her mouth to say something but couldn't find the words. I didn't need to look at them. I already knew what I'd see. The truth has a way of settling on people's faces, and the truth I just revealed was going to take a long time to settle. The aftermath unfolded over the following months like a slow-motion demolition. Tiffany's alimony claim collapsed. The evidence I'd presented showed she'd already extracted hundreds of thousands in personal benefits during their marriage. Her lawyer advised her to settle for $85,000, less than a third of what she'd originally demanded. But that wasn't the real damage. The real damage was to her reputation. Someone leaked the courtroom transcript. Within weeks, screenshots of her spending habits were circulating on social media. The Instagram account where she'd once posted luxury hauls went private, then disappeared entirely. Last I heard, she was living with her mother in Tacoma, working at a real estate office. The friends who'd celebrated her wedding had stopped returning her calls. Garrett fared worse. The revelation of misappropriated company funds triggered an audit. Our investors demanded accountability. The board we'd never really had suddenly materialized, and they were not happy. He was removed as CEO in November, not technically fired. He was allowed to resign to save face, but everyone in the industry knew what had happened. The man who'd charmed investors and clients for 15 years was revealed to be someone who'd stolen from his own company to fund his affair. He tried to start a new venture, a hospitality consulting firm, but his name was poison now. Nobody would take his calls. The house he'd kept in the divorce foreclosed. He couldn't make the payments without his CEO salary. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Renton, a 40-minute drive from everything he'd built. I know because mutual friends told me. I didn't seek out the information, but people couldn't resist sharing, as if they wanted me to feel vindicated. I did, a little, but mostly I just felt tired. Jolene never recovered professionally. After Cloud 9, she tried 2 more jobs in the industry. Neither lasted more than 3 months. Her reputation preceded her now, a trail of documented failures and burned bridges. She moved back in with Marlene, 2 women in a house full of resentment, each blaming the other for how their lives had turned out. Marlene calls me once about 6 months after the trial. I let it go to voicemail. Brenda, it's Barbara. I know things ended badly between us, but I wanted you to know that I see now. I see how much you did for this family, how much you did for Jolene. We should have appreciated you more. We should have... Her voice broke. She didn't finish the thought. I deleted the message without calling back. Some doors, once closed, should stay closed. Pinnacle Hospitality Systems is thriving. Without Garrett's management, without Jolene's dead weight, without the constant drain of personal expenses disguised as business costs, the company has never been healthier. Our annual recurring revenue hit $19.8 million last quarter. We've added 70 new hotel clients in the past year. I'm CEO now, the title I should have had from the beginning. The board of directors, such as it is, appointed me unanimously after Garrett's departure. Some nights I stay late at the office, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The Space Needle in the distance, the ferries crossing Elliott Bay, the city I've called home for 20 years. He tried to start a new venture, a hospitality consulting firm, but his name was poison now. Nobody would take his calls. The house he'd kept in the divorce foreclosed. He couldn't make the payments without his CEO's salary. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Renton, a 40-minute drive from everything he'd built. I know because mutual friends told me. I didn't seek out the information, but people couldn't resist sharing, as if they wanted me to feel vindicated. I did, a little, but mostly I just felt tired. Jolene never recovered professionally. After Cloud 9, she tried 2 more jobs in the industry. Neither lasted more than 3 months. Her reputation preceded her now, a trail of documented failures and burned bridges. She moved back in with Marlene, 2 women in a house full of resentment, each blaming the other for how their lives had turned out. Marlene called me once, about 6 months after the trial. I let it go to voicemail. Brenda, it's Barbara. I know things ended badly between us, but I wanted you to know that I see now. I see how much you did for this family, how much you did for Jolene. We should have appreciated you more. We should have... Her voice broke. She didn't finish the thought. I deleted the message without calling back. Some doors once closed should stay closed. Pinnacle Hospitality Systems is thriving. Without Garrett's management, without Jolene's dead weight, without the constant drain of personal expenses disguised as business costs, the company has never been healthier. Our annual recurring revenue hit $19.8 million last quarter. We've added 70 new hotel clients in the past year. I'm CEO now, the title I should have had from the beginning. The board of directors, such as it is, appointed me unanimously after Garrett's departure. Some nights I stay late at the office, looking out at the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle in the distance, the ferries crossing Elliott Bay, the city I've called home for 20 years.